Here's what nobody wants to say out loud. Workplaces can destroy your self-worth. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, systematically, through environments and behaviors that chip away at your confidence until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Today, we're naming 20 of those red flags because the first step to protecting yourself is knowing what you're up against. Red flag 1. Your manager criticizes your work publicly but praises others privately. There is a specific kind of damage that comes from being corrected in front of your peers while watching colleagues receive quiet encouragement behind closed doors. It's not just embarrassing. It's a signal that your manager uses visibility as a tool of control. Public criticism, when it's the pattern and not the exception, teaches you that making mistakes is dangerous and that you are, in some way, less protected than others. Over time, you stop taking risks. You stop contributing boldly. You start performing defensively, not to succeed, but to avoid being the example of what not to do. Constructive feedback delivered privately is a sign of a manager who wants you to grow. Public takedowns are a sign of a manager who wants you manageable. Red flag 2. Your contributions are routinely credited to someone else. You finish the analysis. You develop the strategy. You stay late to prepare the deck. And then you watch someone else present it and receive the applause. Credit theft is one of the most corrosive workplace experiences because it attacks something foundational, the link between your effort and your identity. If your work disappears into someone else's reputation repeatedly, your brain starts to disengage from the work itself. Why invest in what will never be yours? If you can't point to a single visible win in the last 6 months that's attached to your name, that's not bad luck. That's a pattern worth examining. Red flag 3. You are left out of meetings that directly affect your work. Exclusion is a form of communication. When decisions about your role, your projects, or your team are made without you in the room, the message, intended or not, is that your perspective isn't valued enough to include. Over time, this exclusion erodes your sense of agency. You start experiencing your own work life as something that happens to you rather than something you have a hand in shaping. You stop preparing to contribute because contributing doesn't seem to change anything. Pay attention to what meetings you are, and aren't, invited to. The invite list tells you exactly where you stand in the unofficial hierarchy. Red flag 4. Vague, moving standards make it impossible to succeed. You hit the goal changes. You hit the new goal. Now it's not about the goal, it's about something else. The standards for success in your workplace feel like fog. Present enough to disorient you, impossible to actually grasp. This is one of the most psychologically destabilizing environments a person can work in. When the definition of success shifts constantly, and especially when it shifts right after you think you've achieved something, you stop trusting your own judgment about your performance. You become dependent on external validation that never fully comes. Healthy workplaces have clear, consistent standards. If you are perpetually confused about what good looks like, the confusion is not accidental. Red flag 5. Mistakes are treated as character defects, not learning opportunities. Everyone makes mistakes at work. The question is what happens next. In a healthy environment, a mistake is a data point, something to understand, address, and move past. In a toxic one, a mistake becomes part of who you are. You notice it in the language. This is typical of you. You always do this. I'm not surprised. These phrases don't address what went wrong. They assign it to your identity. And when you internalize enough of those assignments, you start believing them. If the culture around you treats errors as evidence of who people fundamentally are, rather than what they temporarily did, your self-worth is quietly being dismantled every time something goes wrong. Red flag 6. Your instincts are regularly dismissed or overridden without explanation. You raise a concern. It's waved away. You suggest a different approach. The suggestion disappears. You see a problem coming? You say so, and nobody acknowledges it until it arrives. And even then, no one connects your warning to what happened. Being consistently ignored teaches you to distrust your own judgment. Eventually, you stop voicing your perspective at all, not because you have nothing to offer, but because you've been trained to believe your input doesn't matter. That silence is not wisdom. It's self-erasure. When your professional instincts are routinely invalidated, the damage isn't just to your confidence, it's to your ability to trust yourself outside of work, too. Red flag 7. Overwork is celebrated as identity, and rest is treated as weakness. 70-hour weeks get praised. Skipping vacation is seen as dedication. The colleague who is always online, always responsive, always available, is held up as the model to follow. And you've started to feel guilty for having boundaries, for leaving at a reasonable hour, for saying you need a day off. This is a workplace that has confused exhaustion with excellence, and it will hollow you out. The damage isn't only physical. Chronic overwork fundamentally alters your sense of self. You become your output. Your worth becomes conditional on your productivity. And when burnout eventually arrives, as it always does, you won't just be tired. You'll feel like a failure. Your value as a human being is not your availability. A workplace that insists otherwise is lying to you. Red flag 8. The people who thrive seem to do so through politics, not performance. You watch someone who does mediocre work get promoted because they're skilled at managing perception. You watch the person who does excellent work get passed over because they don't know the right people or say the right things in front of leadership. You start to feel like the game is rigged, and that honest, hard work is slightly foolish. This belief is deeply corrosive to motivation. When performance stops correlating to reward, the rational brain starts asking, why bother? And when you stop bothering, you lose access to the sense of mastery and progress that makes work meaningful. If the path to success in your workplace requires you to become someone you're not, that workplace is not just frustrating, it's actively reshaping your identity. Red flag 9. Feedback is absent until something goes wrong. You receive no acknowledgement when things go well, no recognition, no development conversations, no check-ins about your growth or goals. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, there's a serious conversation about a performance issue you weren't aware was building. The absence of feedback is its own kind of message. It says, you're not worth investing in. And the sudden appearance of critical feedback with no prior context says, you're only worth noticing when you've caused a problem. People need feedback to calibrate, to know where they stand, what's working, and what to adjust. Without it, you're navigating in the dark, and eventually, you start assuming the darkness means something is wrong with you. Red flag 10. Your personal life is treated as an inconvenience or a liability. You mention a family obligation and see a flicker of irritation. You need to leave early for a medical appointment and feel the need to over-explain and apologize extensively. The culture treats any acknowledgement that you have a life outside work as an imposition on the organization. When your humanity is treated as inconvenient, you start suppressing it. You stop mentioning the things that matter to you. You start performing a version of yourself that has no personal needs, no limits, no circumstances. That performance is exhausting, and it slowly disconnects you from your own identity. You are a whole person who works. You are not a function that occasionally requires maintenance. Any workplace that gets this backward is not a safe place for your sense of self. Red flag 11. Your peers undermine rather than support each other. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from working in an environment where colleagues compete rather than collaborate, where credit is hoarded, information is withheld strategically, and your peers' success feels like a threat to your own. These environments are usually created from the top down. When leadership creates conditions where team members must fight for limited recognition or security, cooperation becomes irrational. And when you spend enough time in that environment, you start to internalize the scarcity mindset. You become more guarded, more suspicious, less generous, and then you stop recognizing yourself. The people around you shape who you become. If your coworkers are constantly in competition with you, the version of you that survives that environment may not be the version you'd choose. Red flag 12. There is no clear path forward, no matter how hard you try. You've asked about advancement. You've been told soon for 2 years. You've taken on more responsibility without a corresponding title or compensation change. Every time a role opens that you'd be right for, something happens. A restructure, a freeze, an outside hire. You're never quite told no, but you're never quite given yes. Ambiguity about your future is psychologically corrosive in a specific way. It keeps you working hard while eroding your hope. You stay because leaving feels like admitting defeat, but staying is slowly convincing you that you simply aren't promotable, that something about you is the problem. The problem is rarely you. The problem is an organization that needs your performance without any intention of investing in your growth. Red flag 13. You are frequently interrupted, talked over, or ignored in meetings. You start making a point. Someone speaks over you. You raise an idea. It disappears. And then a colleague says essentially the same thing 20 minutes later and receives real engagement. You've learned to wait for a pause that never quite comes. Being consistently talked over is not a small inconvenience. It is an ongoing message about whose voice is valued and whose isn't. And when that message repeats often enough, you deliver it to yourself. You start pre-editing your contributions. You stay quiet on things you know deeply. You confuse strategic silence with a lack of worthwhile perspective. If you left the last 10 meetings feeling invisible, notice that. It matters. Red flag 14. Humor and camaraderie often come at your expense. There are jokes in your workplace, and you've noticed that you're frequently the subject of them. It's framed as teasing, as affection, as, "We're just like that here." But the jokes tend to highlight your mistakes, exaggerate your weaknesses, or mock the things you care about. And when you express discomfort, the response is that you're too sensitive. This is a form of social control that disguises itself as fun. It establishes a hierarchy through humor and places you consistently below it. Over time, you start to adopt the joke. You self-deprecate preemptively. You make yourself small before anyone else can do it for you. A workplace where your dignity is a punchline is not a workplace where your self-worth can survive intact. Red flag 15. Leadership responds to problems with denial, not accountability. Something goes wrong. A legitimate concern is raised, and the organizational response is to minimize, deflect, or blame the person who raised the issue. The problem gets buried. The person who named it quietly learns not to name things. This pattern, institutional denial, forces you into a specific kind of cognitive dissonance. Your perception tells you something is wrong. The official narrative tells you your perception is the problem. And the more you defer to the official narrative to stay safe, the less you trust your own eyes and instincts. Workplaces that cannot acknowledge their own failures will eventually teach you that your reality isn't real. That is the most fundamental form of self-worth destruction. Red flag 16. You feel a sense of dread on Sunday evenings. This one isn't about a specific behavior. It's about what your body already knows. Sunday dread is your nervous system telling you that the place you spend most of your waking hours does not feel safe. It is not weakness. It is not drama. It is information. Most people learn to push through it. They normalize it because everyone they know seems to have it too. But chronic workplace dread reshapes your baseline. You start to experience low-grade anxiety as your default state. You forget what it felt like to approach work with energy and optimism. If your week begins with dread and ends with relief, something in that environment is costing you more than you're being paid. Red flag 17. Your manager takes credit for your ideas in front of senior leadership. There is a specific quiet theft that some managers specialize in, listening carefully to what you share in one-on-ones and then presenting your thinking to their own leadership as their own. You discover it in a meeting you weren't supposed to be in, or from a colleague who mentions they loved your manager's idea, the one that started as yours. Beyond the professional consequences, this is a form of intellectual betrayal that damages your relationship with your own creativity. You become reluctant to think out loud. You withhold your best ideas. You start to believe, somewhere beneath conscious awareness, that your thinking is worth stealing, but not worth crediting. Both things cannot be true at once. Refuse to internalize the contradiction. Red flag 18. Boundaries are treated as disloyalty. You say no to a request that falls outside your role. You decline to take on a project that conflicts with your existing commitments. You establish a limit around your personal time. And the response, direct or implicit, is that you're not a team player, that you're difficult, that people who are really committed don't operate that way. A workplace that treats every boundary as an act of betrayal is a workplace that wants unlimited access to you. That is not loyalty, that is extraction. And when you are repeatedly punished for protecting yourself, you eventually stop protecting yourself. You become someone who says yes to everything and owns nothing. Your ability to set limits is not a flaw to overcome. It is a form of self-respect that a healthy organization will honor. Red flag 19. You've started to apologize for things that aren't your fault. This one creeps up slowly. You apologize when a project is delayed by someone else's deadline. You apologize when a meeting runs long because your manager keeps adding agenda items. You apologize before sharing an idea, as if the idea itself requires advance forgiveness. You've become fluent in preemptive apology. This is your self-worth adapting to an environment that has taught you to take up less space. Excessive apology is not politeness. It's a learned response to an atmosphere where you've absorbed the message that your mere presence requires justification. Notice how often you apologize this week. The number will tell you something important about how this workplace has been shaping you. Red flag 20. You no longer recognize the person you've become at work. This is the most important red flag of all, and the hardest to see while you're inside it. You look at how you behave in meetings. Guarded, deflecting, overly cautious, and you don't recognize yourself. You think about who you were when you started this job. Curious, confident, willing to speak up. And the distance between that person and this one feels enormous. Toxic workplaces don't announce themselves. They work through accumulation. 1,000 small signals that slowly recalibrate your sense of what's normal, what you deserve, and who you are. By the time the transformation is complete, you may have forgotten that you were ever any different. You haven't changed. You've adapted, and adaptation is not destiny. These 20 red flags exist on a spectrum, and almost every workplace has some of them in some form. The question isn't perfection, it's pattern. One difficult manager is a challenge. All 20 of these every day is an emergency. You owe it to yourself to know the difference, and now you do.